Buddy, what is up, guys? Man, we got a snow day going on right now. We were drinking some matcha earlier. I'm just hanging with the baby. We got the puppy right here. Finished the matcha though, that's unfortunate. But I've been wanting to take a break from coffee. I've been way too hard on coffee for a long time. And we've had periods where we'd go in and then we'd come out and we would try matcha, but matcha just like doesn't hit the same as coffee. But recently, it does. So, hey, cheers to that. I still have the cup, but it's empty. But hey, cheers. So, what's going on? How are you? Dude, it's first off, you have everything already that you need to know, so to speak. Yes, there are periods of time where we will want to seek out information, seek knowledge, and I think that's such a beautiful thing. I feel like I, to some extent, can't get enough knowledge. Yet, I have really limited a lot of actual embodiment and outward expression of the thing because of the perpetual seeking of knowledge and consumption of knowledge. And I like so many books and so many podcasts and so many like YouTube videos, and there was just a long period of time where it like I couldn't be in silence, other than like the allocated times where I was in meditation. I would have something playing, an audiobook, a podcast, like something. And in the pursuit of creating that feeling of productivity, if I'm consuming something that's going to be helping me, I wasn't just taking in information that was like mind numbing, so to speak. But in that pursuit of consistently engaging in consuming content, I wasn't really allowing any space to breathe. I was just taking in, but not really digesting anything. And, this is a video, so to speak, so you are in the process of taking in something right now. But the intention behind this is how do we then actually create a process of fully embodying and taking all of this stuff that's up within our own mind and bringing it down into the body. In the last video, we were talking a lot about the process of how our health and the way that we take care of our health and the elements of sovereignty that falls within that. And if you haven't watched that, then go back and watch it and listen to it if you want to. If not, that's fine too. Don't consume content, you know what I mean? But bringing things down from conceptual understanding to bodily knowing is a process that we need to actually get out in the world and feel the process, and knowing that that process is going to be messy. And the part of also why I felt like I was consuming so much content for so long, and I still do consume content, it's not like it's not there, but this season of my life I am being far more adamant towards being in silence more than normal. Even listening to music, like music is beautiful. I'm a musician. I love music, but it's still like noise. That I have found that once the noise is really calmed down, in the beginning there was a lot of like discomfort in a way. Not like it's not the most uncomfortable thing in the world. There's definitely things that are more uncomfortable. But it was the habit of taking in content and feeling that dopamine hit from receiving something like that, similar to when we're consuming food. It does release a dopaminergic effect in the body, and so it was like the same thing. And initially when I was pulling away from consuming content, it just felt off and it felt uncomfortable. But I would find is after allowing some time to pass, massive amounts of these like streams of consciousness would come through me, not like something beyond me, but just stuff within my own brain, processing, realizations, a lot of aha moments would really start to fill my system. And then I would feel more encouraged to create a post for social media or just do some writing for myself. And the more time that I've been sitting in silence, the more time that there's been the process of actually allowing these things to come through. And that's one element, is how we begin to start letting all of this come down into here, is actually giving the space for those things to come down. Another part of that is I was afraid to take action because as I've said in a couple videos on TikTok, like a recovering perfectionist, that if something wasn't going to be perfect, it terrified me to do it. A lot of that fear came from insecurity as a child, of not feeling enough and feeling like if I do something wrong, or if I'm being looked at as like kind of figuring it out, that I'm going to be judged and ridiculed, and that triggers, like old wounds of wanting to feel feel like a level of belonging in the world. And that's been something that, I've struggled with for a lot of my life, not necessarily feeling like I belong. But, on a side tangent on that, the feeling of belongingness, the more that I have felt like I've belonged within my own vessel, the more that I feel like I belong in the world. So something you said, that if you are somebody who has struggled with or have felt deeply in times that it's hard to feel like you belong, maybe you look at how much you actually feel like you belong within your own vessel. Because I've found that the more that I really like enjoy who I am and actually like who I am, like this analogy I've given is, if you can love a family member, but you may not necessarily like them. Like, you can love a cousin, a sibling, a parent even, but you don't necessarily like hanging out with them or like being around them, but you still love them, And I feel with ourselves, if we're still alive and we're still engaging in the world to some degree, we have enough love for ourselves to, not end our own life, or not completely tear ourselves apart into addiction or dismantling and self-sabotage to a degree. But to really like yourself is an entirely different thing. And that's been, I would say, probably within the past year, but mostly within the past 6 months, that element of well, maybe more than 6 months. Definitely within this past year, though, and the past couple years of doing things that are, and going back to what we were talking about taking action towards the imperfect action to actually start transmuting what is up here into here and as a part of your being, through doing things that were imperfect and showing myself that I can go through with those things, I started to like myself more. And where was I going with that? And when you actually like how you are, you feel like you do belong, because that sense of belonging is here. Home is not necessarily bound to the geographical location or in the world where you are, but it's where your heart lies, and that heart stems first here. So, a little side tangent, but it still plays a part, It still plays a part, and just taking the time to actually embody knowledge so that it turns into wisdom is an intimate practice, because especially now, there are so many people who will tell you how to do something. This is the way you need to be eating. This is the way you need to be training. This is the way you need to be thinking. This is the way you need to just be living your life in general. And not all of that is bad. There are some things that are useful, but in the way that social media frames it, at least how I take it, is if I'm not living to these certain standards, then I'm doing something wrong, and I am lesser than because of that. And that is really fucking heavy to be with, because then it's just this perpetual thing of, all of that, I'm just never fucking enough because I can't live up to these standards of perfection all the time. And I think a lot of my older content I would make would come from this place of trying to be like those people, of trying to portray a level of perfectionism in order to set some kind of standard that wasn't really innately even mine. But you don't really know what's yours until you actually try it out. And I'm 28 years old. I'm just a young pup, dude. There's still so much that I'm trying to figure out and learn. And but with that said, I still feel like I got something to say. So here's the video, and all my social media is just me saying stuff. So, that contrast of we can feel something within our heart and take action towards it, but then also know that we're still fucking figuring it out. And when you look at any master of any discipline, whether that be music, martial arts, something, like, the more you go down the thing, the more you realize, like, you don't know shit. But then the beginner thinks that they know everything, you know? But the funny thing about that with martial arts, like when I first started doing martial arts when I was young, it's like in middle school, I would talk so much shit about, like, yeah, I do MMA. I'm pretty badass, but I wouldn't want anybody to know that I was a white belt, you know? I didn't want anybody to know that I, like, was still getting the fucking ropes down, but I wanted everybody to know that I fucking was a martial artist or whatever the fuck. And as time's gone on, I haven't practiced martial arts in a long time, but, like, as I got better, I noticed that I just, like, didn't talk about it as much because I got my ass kicked so many times, and I'm like, yeah, it's okay. We don't really need to know about that right now. But, you know, it's still something that's there. I don't even know why I was going in that. I don't have any notes today. We're just ripping off the top of the dome right now. So if we're a little kind of scattered, here we are. And I feel like I'm talking really fast. It's when it's cold, I feel like talking fast helps warm me up. But, you know, snow day outside, so either way, like, allowing ourselves to actually take imperfect action, you know, like, it feels intimidating because it's just messy, like, and it is messy. And, you know, when we strive for perfection or when we hold ourselves to really hard standards, letting ourselves be in a vulnerable place of looking imperfect, like this video right now is not perfect at all, but there's an honoring that I'm making to myself of, this is something I want to do, and I'm going to do it, and we're going to see what happens. And it's an honoring because there's been so many things that I've wanted to do, but out of the fear of looking stupid, I didn't do it. But what I've noticed is that going back, like, the more that I've become to actually like myself and, like, really care for myself, the more grace I allow myself to take imperfect action. And I think another element that's coming to mind right now is also compassion for ourselves. You know, my older brother is a very special human to me, and he's one of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life. His heart and his compassion and his patience are really remarkable, and I've always been incredibly hard on myself. And he would always just tell me, like, man, you are so fucking hard on yourself. And, you know, at the time, like, it was really challenging for me to not be hard on myself because it felt safe to be a taskmaster towards my own vessel, to flagellate my own spine and push myself to do things when really all that did was just, like, deplete me. And, you know, this is my experience. Everybody operates very differently. There are some people who can who can really feel and be pushed to do great things through, like, this kind of, like, commander pressure. I'm not like that. I'm a very sensitive being, and I've noticed that in the past when I was more of that, like, really just fucking beating the shit out of myself, like, yeah, I got shit done, but I felt like shit the whole time. And, you know, it makes me think of, like, I did an ultra marathon in 2021. It was a 60K, and I didn't feel any bit of pride in doing it. Well, I mean, like, I did. Obviously, I just ran almost 40 miles. Like, that's an amazing thing to do, and I trained really hard for it for months, but the main driving force to doing it wasn't innately mine. It was to prove something to myself and to other people. And after that experience, I didn't run for a long time after that because I just felt so depleted and burnt. And I think when there's motivating factors to do things that are not necessarily ours, but they are in ways compensatory actions taken to try to prove something or try to validate something, we can fool ourselves for a long time, so we can take on those actions for years, but I don't feel they ring true, and they won't sustain resonantly within your vessel, and that work can be reflected in how it shows up in the world and how other people receive it, because everything is energy. I mean, and it's not energy in this mystical fashion, but it's, well, I mean, the mystical and the mundane, when we bring those two things together, that's where we really have like a profound experience. But the energetics of, like, when you watch a musician play with their heart, like, it moves you to tears because you can feel the authenticity of that, compared to when you see somebody who's been doing a certain discipline for their whole life because it was forced upon them, and they may be really good at it, but, like, it might carry a little bit differently. And so what I'm saying is the more compassion we can have for ourselves, and compassion is not allowing room for shame, not allowing room to beat ourselves up. Like, I saw this guy's video the other day. Well, actually, no, it was not the other day. It was this morning on Instagram, and he was talking about, like, bringing shame back. And his video was a good video, too, so to speak. Like, he was talking about how he felt ashamed of where he was in his life, and he allowed that energy to fuel him to take action in other places. And that message is great, but I think shame is a very debilitating emotion, because when we're filled with shame, it's this inner process of, like, something is wrong with me. Now, I think a different way to reword that expression that he was making, because the message was good, like, he saw himself not in alignment with who he knew he could be, and he kind of lost himself in a way. And then that feeling of shame that he experienced was a catalyst that propelled him to taking better action. And now this guy has a huge platform, like over 2 million followers on TikTok, like almost 1 million on Instagram, and his YouTube's blown up, and he's doing great things in the world, and he's speaking a good message. But I still think, like, being really mindful with our words is crucial, because everybody's interpretation of a word is different, and you can't please everybody. And obviously a lot of people resonate with this video. It had a lot of attraction, but I don't agree with, like, bringing shame back, because in my experience, shame has only made me feel small and weak, and like I was in error in the world. And I think there's something to be said about, like, persistent compassion. Like, how do I even explain that? It's like a parent. A parent can have a lot of care for their child, but when their child is doing something wrong, they're not going to shame the little kid into doing something better. Like, a lot of parents have done that. Probably your parent has done that to you. One of my parents is, like, parents have done that to me too, but, like, they weren't trying to shame. They were doing their best to try to, like, correct an action to make it better. But it still happens, and it doesn't have to just come from parents. It can come from teachers, it can come from other friends. But when there's this shame that's put onto somebody, it's very heavy, it's very sticky. And so when you see, like, really great parental figures that can kind of, like, hold the compassion for the child and yet be stern with them, and, like, hey, cut the shit. Like, we don't do that, but lead through example. I think that carries a lot stronger resonance. And with ourselves, I do a lot of inner child work with myself, with my clients, and it's something that I think is incredibly important, because it's not that we need to feed our childlike nature. Well, we do need to feed our childlike nature, but it's not that we should embrace, like, being childish, but in, like, a immature sense. But it's that, when you look at the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, if you haven't read the book, it's an amazing book. It's dominantly dictated towards men, but women can also read it too. But in the beginning of that book, it talks about these structures within the individual as a pyramid, and the base is the inner child, and then it expands outward to the adult. And in that little kid, like, 10-year-old me is still a part of me, and I have noticed the ego structure tends to carry a lot of our childlike tendencies. When we get angry about something, or when we get jealous about something, or when somebody, like when you're in a relationship and somebody really triggers like an attachment wound, that's often like that little kid who's just kind of like feeling that frustration. And if you shame that little kid, yeah, it can be a big catalyst to making some change, but I believe that sustained efforts and really profound evolution comes from integrating those parts of you with love and compassion and patience, with also a stern consistency towards pushing yourself. And when you are pushing yourself in taking imperfect action done through the lens of self-compassion, there could be a possibility that things feel a lot lighter, and it's not as heavy and it's not as big of a deal. Making YouTube videos, for example, and posting more on my social media has been something that's been in my heart for honestly like 10 years. And throughout these 10 years, I've had seasons where I would make content and then I would fall off, and I would make content and I'd fall off. And every time I would fall off was because I was afraid of the imperfection. I was afraid of looking stupid, and I would get in my head. I would get insecure. I would think about what other people were thinking too much, and it would derail me from achieving. And when I put shame on myself of like, you fucking bitch, like, why aren't you doing more? Like, it would just tear me up. And, not everybody's as sensitive as me, but I still think people are really sensitive. They just don't know it. Like, it's like that video of, I saw this video on social media like a while ago of somebody who like purchased a horse from, they like saved a horse, or like they like rescued a horse or something, and the caption was like, "Oh, you can hit him harder. He's really stubborn." And that was like the caption of the video. And then the video itself showed this woman like just very gently rubbing her fingers against the skin of the horse, and the whole body of the horse just rippled. Something like that. Like, a horse is so sensitive. If you've ever spent time around horses, they are incredibly tapped in, incredibly energetically sensitive to other people's feelings and emotions. That's why they're used for therapy. And, people can look at that animal and think because it's so large and mighty and powerful that, they can take a beating. And it's like, yeah, just because it can take a beating, does that mean that it should? Is that really the most productive way to get the animal to do what you want it to do? And same with ourselves. Like, the healthier you become, the more you honor your nutrition, for example, the less tolerance you have to eat bullshit. Like, if you're a healthy individual and you eat a Snickers bar, like, it's not going to kill you, but you're going to most likely feel like shit. Like, last time I ate McDonald's was, it's 2026 right now. Last time I ate McDonald's was 2019. And I was on a road trip with my buddies, and we went to a McDonald's to get coffee because it was late at night, and we were all like really fucking high at the time. And we were like, you know what? Let's just fucking get a burger. Why not? And before that, it had been like years before I had had fast food before that. And I ate a burger from McDonald's, and it fucked my stomach up so bad. And, it's not because I can't handle it. It's just because when the vessel is clean, it doesn't have the tolerance to handle harsh bullshit. And so the way that we speak to ourselves, like, we could have been raised in an environment where brutality and discipline and like pushing was really the way that was enforced. And some people have a higher bandwidth to tolerate those things and other people don't. But I really believe if you make more space for that gentleness to come in, like, a lot's sitting underneath. A lot of men specifically like hold on to a lot of emotion, and a lot of women do too. Like, for all my ladies out there watching this, like, I see you too. I work with a lot of women. I'm very close with a lot of women. Like, women hold on to a lot of shit too. But it's different. Like, men and women hold on to things in their own experiential way, and that tolerance to be able to sustain like shit can grow. But underneath that surface, like, there could still be an uneasiness inside, even though we can fool ourselves. And we'll fool ourselves by doing things to numb or coast, like, coat to cover up the pain, you know what I'm trying to say, with substances, with alcohol, with material acquisition, and just constantly purchasing and buying things, with dating people and moving from one relationship to the next. Like, there's a plethora of ways we can fool ourselves and numb ourselves and distract. But the issue still falls there, that there is something underneath that is not being addressed. And to actually have the level of compassion to be with yourself in that moment, and when it's very tender, takes a lot of fucking strength. So taking the imperfect action and really allowing yourself to find your own way of embodying knowledge and turning it into wisdom, into a felt experience in your body, allowing yourself to like fucking be gentle with yourself will go a long way. It's far more sustainable, much more sustainable. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to go into. Yeah. Nah, I feel, it's probably it for now. It's 26 minutes. I think we're pretty good here. I would love for you to leave a comment and let me know what it is that, like, what type of imperfect action are you wanting to take in your life? And leaving it in the comment section is almost like a declaration to yourself. Whether you're listening and watching on YouTube or Spotify, you can comment on both. What type of imperfect action have you been holding yourself back from taking that you feel, maybe after watching this, that you might feel ready to start doing? And how can you be a little bit more compassionate with yourself, yet stern? Okay, so one more thing actually before we wrap up. Being compassionate and being stern. I know I kind of already talked about that a little bit with the child and with the thing. One of the things I'll highlight with my personal experience on this is making these videos, for example. Like, there's a part of me that still really doesn't want to do it because I'm like nervous and it's uncomfortable to do this in a way, because it's putting myself out there when I don't have the fucking perfect. I'm in my room, like I'm using my iPhone. I don't have any lighting. It's just lighting from the window behind me. I don't even know if what I'm talking about is like even resonating or making any sense. I'm looking at it and like thinking, what are people gonna think and whatever the fuck. But like, I know in my heart this is what I want. And so I'm going to be stern with myself in a way of like, hey dude, keep going. When I notice I'm scrolling on my phone too much, it's like, hey dude, you know you don't want to do this. Like, when I want to do, like, I just recently stopped smoking weed, and that's like a whole other thing, like, because I did a year of sobriety, and all of 2025, like, tried to find a way of reintegrating it back in my life, and it was just not working. But when I was trying to stop, like, smoking, I would just feel so much guilt around it. And as soon as I started being compassionate of like, hey dude, it's okay, but also, you know what you want, so stop doing that. Like, hold that line, hold yourself. So it's a balance. Like, compassion and sternness can work together. And back to like the riding the horse analogy, like, you need to be strong and stern when you're controlling a horse. I mean, so to speak, right? Like, your legs have to do a lot of work with the hands. It's very light movements, but like, you need to be there. When you're working with an animal, like, animals require you to have a level of direction, but yet compassion and gentleness and ease, because they feel you. And we are animals. We're just very fragile and naked, so to speak. Like, we don't have like fur all over our bodies, and but we're very intelligent, and we're still animals. So treating ourselves with that compassion, with a stern drive towards where we're going, can take us pretty far. So, much love, my friends. Talk soon.